Okay, so if the Cosmere has ever felt like a huge and confusing mess, this is the video for you because I want to explain how I think about the Cosmere and how to interpret what's happening. But this video, and I think this is the first video that I've ever done that will have zero spoilers. So if you haven't read any of the books, totally fine because this is a video for you. And as a starting point, I really love the Cosmere, and I particularly like it because it feels like you're peeling back all of these different layers, but you don't need to know all of those layers to really enjoy the Cosmere. So let's take it one layer at a time. So the first layer is kind of like the basic shape. So if you think about it as an onion, it's like kind of the basic shape of an onion. I probably should have brought an onion to this, but I felt like, I don't know, that'd be weird. It gets at this idea that the Cosmere is like just another word for like a fictional universe, but it's not a single story. It's just like the setting behind different fantasy series. And so this is like fantasy series like Mistborn, Stormlight Archive, Warbreaker, Elantris. They all have their own cast, they all have their own plot, they all have their own world. And in this like kind of first layer, the shape of the onion, you do not need to read other books to enjoy the book that you're reading. The second layer is when the characters in those books start realizing that there are gods running their world or a god running their world. And in all of these books, these gods are not immediately apparent. And so as the characters and as readers ourselves, we enter the second layer. It's like, what is going on? Like, is there a god? Like, what do they want? Who are they? Are we all just pawns in this bigger storyline? That's like the fun of like really unwrapping or unraveling that second layer. When you get to like that third layer of the investigation, you realize that these gods are not gods at all. They're a mess. They are what are known as shards, and they're held by normal people for the most part. Like might not be humans, but they're basically just normal people, and they're deeply flawed people in their own right. So I think this is where like you really see the characters in the story start to be like, oh crap, like these so-called gods or self-anointed gods are like not going to be our saviors in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, they may be some of the catalysts behind some of the struggles that the characters are facing. This is also the phase that I feel like a character that you may meet known as Hoid, or sometimes Wit is in, where he's like, dang, like these gods ain't, and like you sort of kind of want to just like smack them around. And that's why you see somebody like a character like Hoid sometimes kind of like dismiss this idea of gods and just be like, no, like there aren't gods. Like don't overthink these guys, these shards that are running the show. The next layer of the investigation, I think, gets to where the shards came from. And that's as shardic or pieces of a single being known as Adonalsium. And about 10,000 years before most of the events of any of the books, I think, for the most part, that you may read that are set in the Cosmere, 10,000 years preceding those, this being known as Adonalsium was shattered into these shardic pieces. So I think the fourth layer of that investigation is like, what's the deal with Adonalsium? Like, who is this guy? Was he like a one god? Like, how did he get killed? Did he allow himself to get killed? And these are all questions that like no one in the books, none of the characters in any of the books, I think, actually know the answers to these. The people holding the shards may have done so for their own reasons, but they, I believe, did not know what Adonalsium's ultimate goals or motives were. And so if you hear people talk about, like, what is Adonalsium's grand plan? Does he have a grand plan? Those are questions that I think are like that fourth layer of investigation, which is what is going on with Adonalsium. And then the fifth layer, which is where we're really getting into speculation, I think, is like what preceded Adonalsium or what existed that is separate from Adonalsium. Is there something outside of his power? What do the bounds of the Cosmere look like even? And this is where we're like in deep speculation mode, and I like really, really don't know what we're gonna get. but I think it's also one of the most interesting parts when you really get into the Cosmere. It's one of the most interesting parts to like really speculate on. So all of this to say, this metaphor is mostly just a way to like think about how to approach the Cosmere. You don't need to know all of these like layers to like really appreciate the stories on their surface, and you can go one layer deeper and just like appreciate the connectivity, but without getting into like ad nauseum and like what preceded him, or what, what the kind of the conflict between the shards looks like all of that is irrelevant to like sometimes just appreciating the story. So yeah, so check out my other videos. I'll put up a couple here that are maybe like the next step of this kind of like 101 intro, and then let's go from there. So thank you, everyone.